Now, Ms Hübner, the European Union has obviously published its draft withdrawal agreement today. One of the key points that have been identified by the UK is the role of the European Court of Justice, the ECJ, in resolving any disputes regarding the agreement. Now, a British red line has always been no involvement of the ECJ post-Brexit. Indeed, the Prime Minister has been very clear on that. Where do you see the compromise happening here?
We also have to be aware of the fact that the British side, from the very beginning, I think, from Lancaster's speech for sure, has always been in favor of having a transition period, which I think from the beginning was called implementation period. And when we are talking about the ECJ as being the court that is dominating the governance system under transition, is not beyond the transition. We are talking about the situation where all the European acquis is extended. That's the proposal for the transition period to the end of 2020, that we do not have a new bespoke agreement, that we at the beginning we were planning maybe to have also some sort of European economic area for the transition, but there was no time, so the only way to approach was to extend the membership of UK in the single market, to extend the membership of UK in the customs union, and that goes then without saying that then the only court which is for European acquis is the European Court of Justice. So it cannot be questioned and it cannot be changed for the transition period. For the future, the whole system of finding solution for European citizenship, for example, will still some sort of involvement of the European Court of Justice. But for other areas conflicts, we still have the possibility of having a special arbitration system, which was not yet negotiated or discussed. So we are waiting actually for the position of UK on the so-called governance for the future relationship. But the problem is we have no idea what kind of future relationship UK would like to have. We know what UK does not want to have. We don't know what UK would like to have. So then we will come back to the discussion on the governance and on the role of the arbitration system, on the role of European Court of Justice.
Now, beyond the transition period, where it is going to be a status quo arrangement, to some extent, whatever extent that might be, in terms of the UK's opinion, one politically at home thing that Theresa May has to be aware of is the members of her own party who are very, very conscious not to make the UK what they say is a vassal state. In other words, going along with rules but having no means of being able to have an opinion on them and influence on them. In terms of the ECJ, specifically to do with the citizens' rights of European citizens who are going to be living in the UK post-Brexit and post-implementation transition period, is it for you a necessity for the ECJ to continue some kind of involvement in their affairs and arbitration on their affairs?
On this we have already largely agreed with UK in the negotiations on the citizenship, because we have negotiated the agreement on how we cope with citizenship also in the future. So not everything is agreed yet. For example, specifically, we have not agreed yet on the so-called cut-off date, meaning that in the transition period, all of European citizens who come to UK, in our view, till the end of transition, should belong to the same group of European citizens who will have the right to this specially negotiated agreement about the future. And there is a role for ECJ. There is, I think, agreement with the UK side. The UK courts and tribunals will be using the sort of tradition of the prejudicial questions that we also have a lot of, in the proposal we have a lot of agreement, a big amount of agreement, I would say, from UK on reaching out to the European Court of Justice, but this has not been questioned. I think what is questioned is that if we are completely outside the European Union law in the future, which is not the case of the European citizens, then of course we have to find an agreement on the system.
A second aspect of the draft withdrawal agreement this morning, which came out this at midday, is with regard to Northern Ireland and Ireland border, specifically the decision and desire to put into the legal agreement the necessity for the UK to ensure that there's no hard border between the island and the Republic, Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland, and also as a just in case there is no solution regarding the border, it would be assumed that there would be a continued membership for Northern Ireland in the customs union, so to prevent a hard border in that situation as well. In terms of the solution to the border problem and the likelihood of ever the clause in this agreement having to actually be implemented, where do you see it lying at the moment? Where do you think progress has been made?
But you might remember that in the agreement, which we call joint report, which was a December agreement, we in fact, I think, both sides supported the idea that the best solution would be for Ireland when in the future relationship agreement UK stays in the single market and stays in the EU customs union, then we don't have any problem with the hard border or with the land border between Republic and Northern Ireland. But we also assumed that it might not be the case, so there was a sort of fallback position that in that case the UK will propose a solution which will be specific for the situation, and then there was the third option, the backstop option, which is for the lack of solution on the basis of the first two proposals. And here we feel responsible as EU, and that's why EU, while still planning and hoping to continue the talks about the first two options, prepared this fallback position, this backstop position, which will be necessary if we don't have solution for the withdrawal, or we don't have solution for the future. And then the only way to go, not to have this hard land border, is to keep as much as possible, and we propose it for the goods only, we don't propose it for the services, that the Northern Ireland respects the norms and standards coming from this segment of the single market, and also that we don't have the custom that would require the hard border. But this is a very specific Northern Ireland only solution that cannot be sort of grandfathered into any other solution, because it goes against many rules that EU has for the future agreement. But this is just a proposal for the situation where we have no agreement, which we have to propose. Can you imagine that we have no agreement on withdrawal, then you don't have transition, and then we need 10 years to negotiate the future, and in the meantime we have the border, the hard border on the Irish island. So it just comes from the consent of the European Union.
And in the sense of where this is going, obviously this withdrawal agreement is now pending negotiations with the UK to ensure that the wording is correct and the clauses are agreeable to both parties. The Prime Minister said this morning that, or Downing Street rather released this morning, that the Prime Minister, we are fully committed to implementing the December agreement, but the EU should be absolutely clear that the Prime Minister is not going to sign up to anything that threatens the constitutional integrity of the UK or its common market.
Yes, we fully understand it, because my understanding, when we have heard it thousands of times, that entire UK is leaving the European Union, but then we just have to negotiate what solution we can have that would, in the opinion of UK, would not undermine the constitutional order, but at the same time would deliver what was agreed with UK, which is no hard border on the island. So how can you do it differently? So that's why we would negotiate, but we cannot forget that before we start negotiating the withdrawal and transition, and remembering that no transition without withdrawal agreement, we have to also ensure that European Union, the 27 member states and European Parliament, that we support this draft text, which is just draft text today, that we don't have then surprises at the end of the whole process when the European Parliament will be giving its consent to the agreement. So that's why we need some time, and I understand it's a week or maybe a little bit more for the member states to look into the agreement, to give also their support, and also for the European Parliament. And then Mr. Barnier will be free to negotiate, which I hope will start as soon as possible after the European Council.
Now, we've had quite a significant change in terms of UK domestic politics, particularly with the Labour Party committing to a customs union arrangement post-Brexit, or with the EU post-Brexit. You've been quoted as saying before that there are many politicians in the UK that don't seem to understand the customs. The customs.
No, there is a big difference between a custom union, some sort of custom union, like for example Turkey has with European Union, Monaco, Andorra have with the European Union. So this is a kind of, some people say, a kind of customs arrangement, And then the European Union customs union, like we all together with the UK today, we have a common external border. We don't have any borders inside. With Turkey, for example, agriculture is out. We you can have the anti-dumping procedures. You have all the non-tariff barriers, and then you cannot have a smooth or frictionless border because there is a lot of exemptions. A custom union just covers usually a limited part of the customs arrangement, so it does not have much to do with the European Union custom union. You can have it, but you just have to understand the differences.
Yeah, and do you find that it's been difficult in terms of the UK leadership and the leaders of the main political parties, Labour Party Jeremy Corbyn and Prime Minister Theresa May? Of course, it's been difficult to, or it's seemingly they don't necessarily understand the nuances and the complexities of customs union arrangements with the...
Well, nobody is probably expecting from politicians to understand all the nitty-gritties of these arrangements, but we of course we have to be sure that we cannot promise that we will have some sort of custom arrangement between the European Union and the UK with a lot of exemptions and without these norms and standards which belong to a single market. We cannot promise people that there will be a frictionless border. So it's just about not promising things which are cannot be delivered under certain solutions, or maybe I would be very happy if the UK decides to stay in the EU customs union, that all those promises then can be delivered.
And just finally on the transition period, obviously that's hoping to be agreed at the European Council meeting in March, the end of March, by the EU leaders, at least what it's going to look like in shape or form. There's been some reports in the UK press that Michel Barnier, the EU's negotiator, is not particularly happy with David Davis's proactivity in the past few weeks, particularly in not coming to Brussels to do one-on-one meets and to sort out the technical discussions which Ollie Robbins has been dealing with. Is that something that you, from your understanding, that's true as well? Mr. Davis has not been present enough to really make a difference?
I don't know much about the presence. I'm absolutely sure that you cannot, it's not enough to have just technical talks and just discuss on technical issues. We need political decisions as well. So my hope now is that next week we will have also political negotiations and political decisions will be made. However, I still doubt whether we can have, taking into account all the differences that we also discussed between the British approach and the EU approach to the transition and withdrawal agreement, and also the doubts that we already know on the current proposal coming from EU, that we can have now agreement, maybe in principle, that we will have a transition based on certain principles, but I can't imagine that all those things can be so quickly negotiated.
So we shouldn't be expecting much from the European Council meeting in March then in terms of...
No, you can expect that the European Council that would be very important if we could agree during the European Council meeting about the framework for the future, because that's also a very important issue, and the idea was actually to have in March a European Council making this decision, but to decide on how detailed framework we can agree upon now depends also on what UK can present in terms of the future vision of the relationship with the European Union. So on this I would hope that we can make progress, but I can't imagine that we could really finalize the negotiations of the withdrawal and transition. For this we actually have time till after summer, probably October, so let's hope that we will have the negotiations very constructive and quick. Don't forget that some issues have not been yet belonging to withdrawal and transition. They have not been negotiated yet. We don't yet know British position on some of the issues, so there is a lot to do and there's no time to further delay the negotiations.
Danuta Hübner, thank you very much.
Thank you.